You hear the screeching of an owl, you hear the wind begin to howl. You know there's zombies on the prowl. And it's terror time again. They've got you running through the night. It's terror time again. And you just might die of fright. It's a terrifying time.
Hello everyone! Welcome to the next edition of Core's Beginner Guide to Project Zomboid. It's been a while. In today's video, we're going to be covering foraging and all that changed from build 40 to build 41. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you all to support the video, and now let's start with what is foraging and how it changed. Foraging is the skill that determines what loot a player could find in the environment that isn't spawned in containers or part of random events. Essentially, this will let you find loot in places it naturally would be. Berries in the woods, rocks on the road, magazines and newspapers inside of buildings and urban areas. This is very different from how it used to be. Previously, all you do is walk into a part of the woods that would let you right click till you got the option to forage, and your character would automatically search based off a timer bar like many other actions in the game. Now it's much more interactive, forcing you to actively explore and search around and check different places for different specific types of loot. It also works in way more areas than it used to, as it used to only work in the woods. Now another thing to mention is a search radius, which can be used to find things that have fallen on the ground, such as car keys around vehicles or pieces of clothing knocked off of either you or zombies, or many things that you may have thrown on the ground, such as magazines or an empty tin can. Now that you know what foraging is, let's cover the character creation menu and what affects your character's ability to forage. Now previously, foraging used to only be affected by a handful of traits and professions such as park ranger, herbalist, or hiker. But now a ton of traits and professions will affect the foraging process in both positive and negative ways. Take for example park ranger. Park Ranger will cause negative weather to be 33% less effective on your foraging rolls compared to a character without it, and it will cause darkness to be 15% less effective against your foraging rolls, essentially providing a buff against natural environmental effects. Park Ranger also positively causes you to be more likely to find certain types of loot, such as 50% more likely to find wild plants and 75% more likely to find herbs. While this may sound obvious, this also applies to professions you wouldn't expect, such as veteran, which gains a larger search radius like park ranger, though not as much, and it's 50% more likely to find ammunition. It's little things like this that can add up the big differences on a playthrough depending on how you choose to build your character. I will list on screen a full chart covering all the professions that affect foraging and how they affect foraging. But professions aren't the only thing that could change up how you loot. Like, did you know Lucky, which most people only expected to give you that rare item loot chance boost, but it also increases your search radius bubble by one whole tile in all directions. Or take Former Scout for example, which also does this, but gives you a 13% modifier against negative weather, making you able to search more effectively in adverse weather such as heavy rain. The reverse is also true. There's a handful of negative traits that will affect your foraging chance for worse, such as short-sighted, which will reduce your search radius by 2 tiles, though this can be counteracted by wearing glasses or reading glasses. The traits and how they affect you should be on the screen as well. Now with the character creation part out of the way, let's cover what you could forage, where you can forage it, and the various factors that affect foraging. Let's start with where to find loot. Logically, your best bet to find different categories of loot is to search the correct areas. You're not gonna find a berry bush while foraging inside of a house, unless the modder incorrectly coded the tile to be the wrong region, but that's not how it works in vanilla, with some niche exceptions, such as the fact you can get extremely lucky and find rare items such as generator magazines while foraging in the woods. So for example, trash piles that you find in old and abandoned houses, or ran down cabins or around dumpsters. These places will often spawn insects, empty bottles, or cans, stuff like that. Cracks in the roads or piles of stone, these are great places to find loose stones and chip stones. Wood piles are a great place to find various types of firewood. If you can logically think of it, you'll likely find something of that type there, then odds are that's where to look. Urban environments are especially good if you're looking for, say, rocks outdoors, or magazines, newspapers, books, and such indoors. You can even use foraging to sometimes find keys, either ones that were already generated on the ground, or if you get lucky, you could scrounge up a set. Now that you know where to look for various types of loot, let's determine what factors are in play to reduce or increase your foraging ability. Walking is the default. It has no positive or negative boost, while sprinting, running, or sneak running reduces your foraging ability by 100% and also will automatically kick you out of the forage mode after about 3 seconds of continuous running. Sneaking provides a 10% buff to your foraging ability, while aiming provides a 33% buff to your forage ability. So you have the option. You should always be aiming while foraging unless you're in a hurry to a destination and are only trying to moderately forage along the way. Now, a variety of moodles all affect your foraging abilities in a variety of ways. The only negative moodle that provides a positive benefit is hungry, which depending on the severity of hunger could provide up to a 50% increase to finding food items. So hey, if you're starving to death, try to forage for some berries and mushrooms. It may just save your life in a pinch. All the rest of the negative moodles will reduce your foraging ability in various increments. Endurance and fatigue reduce your foraging ability by up to 75% depending on the level of moodle, and it'll take whichever of the two is the worst modifier of them if you have both fatigue and endurance built up. Panic and stress are another pair that work like fatigue and endurance, except their fatigue modifier is up to 95% depending on moodle level, and it'll take whichever of the two is at a higher state if you manage to have both. The final grouping is pain, drunkenness, cold status, and sickness. These four also affect up to 95% of your foraging value, and take whichever of the four is the worst currently. Weather and darkness also play big effects into your foraging ability. For weather, i.e. rain, snow, or fog, it can reduce your modifier by up to 75% depending on the severity, and darkness can drop it by up to 95%. And they come with their own unique effects, such as reducing your search radius minimum down to 1.5 tiles instead of 3 tiles. And if darkness at a 50% or higher negative value, you also cannot spot new items. So you can only use it to, say, spot cans or items you may have dropped on the floor. Now, having a light source or an umbrella, though, can reduce the penalty of these effects, with light sources negating the darkness debuff, and an umbrella reducing the rain penalty by 90%. But wait, there's also bonuses for weather and night or day to various categories of looting, such as mushrooms are more likely to be found during or right after rain, and also are more likely to be found at night. So searching the woods at night during a storm with a flashlight may just net you a fuck ton of mushrooms. Or say worms, which get a positive rain and night bonus to being found, but receive a minus 50% likelihood to being found during the day. I'll leave a chart on screen showing every single weather and time impact on the screen for your easy reference. Now, clothing also has effects on your ability to search as well. If an item completely covers your head, face, and eyes, such as a helmet of some sort, it'll reduce your search ability by 75%. If it only covers the face and eyes, like say a welding mask, then it's a 50% penalty. And if it only covers the face but not the eyes, it's a 20% penalty to forage chance. And if it's an item that covers the eyes, like glasses or eye patches, it's a 2.5% penalty. But remember, glasses can offset the much more severe search radius penalty of short-sighted, so it's worth using a pair of reading glasses if you take that trait. The next factor that affects your foraging chances is what time of year it is. That's right, the various seasons. I'm not going to list off every single item that can only be found during certain times of year, but generally items are either 50% more likely to be found during the right season, 50% less likely to be found outside of their prime season, so say berries are more likely to be found during the summer or less likely in the fall, or outside of 3 specific types of berries, not at all during the winter. The same is true of most mushrooms, vegetables, medicinal plants, and more. On the flip side, beauty berries, holly berries, and winter berries can only be found during fall and winter months. The final thing that will determine your foraging ability is nature's abundance, one of the sandbox settings. Very poor will make the loot density in zone 75% worse. Poor makes it 50% worse. Normal, which is apocalypse, survivor, and builder difficulty default, have a 0% modifier. Abundant has a 50% positive modifier, and very abundant, which is found by default in 6 months later, initial infection, winter is coming, and a really CDDA challenge, with a 100% positive modifier, making foraging about twice as effective as usual. One last thing I should mention is that with every successful forage, your endurance will be reduced a slight bit. And I'd also like to mention that whenever you forage, the XP is given in 2 hits. One for initially locating the item, and the second hit is given when you decide to pick it up or discard it. Doesn't matter which one you do, just don't walk away without doing something with the item on the ground, even if that is throwing it into the ether. With that finally finished, let's talk about the various item categories that you can forage for, shall we? There are 33 different search categories within the foraging system that are divided by your foraging level. So some categories are repeats but at a higher level, allowing you to forage for new things. So I think the best way to divide this category up will be by foraging level. Starting at level 0, you are capable of finding berries, mushrooms, wild herbs, wood, stones, junk food, clothing, junk weapons, medical supplies, trash, bait and insects, lemongrass, medicinal plants, and wild plants, aka violets and sunflower seeds. Some things to note is to say for berries. A handful of berries are always poisonous for as long as you play in that world. And once you know which ones are poisonous in that world, you can always just avoid eating those specific berries if you don't have herbalist. Now blackberries, blueberries, winter berries, and beauty berries are never poisonous, while holly berries are always guaranteed to be poisonous. Mushrooms, however, are randomly poisonous, so even if you found a similar looking one in the past, it may be poison next time. They are also up to 5 times more poisonous than berries, so you really don't want to be testing your luck by eating them to see if you get poison or not. Starting at level 2, you could forage for more wild veggies, including leeks, broccoli, red radishes, and grape leaves. You can also forage for a variety of forest rarities, including campfire kits, tent kits, tarps, and tent pegs. At level 3, you could find onions. At level 4, wild fruit could be found, meaning cherries and rose hips. You can also find ammunition for a variety of weapons, from bullets, magazines, or even very rarely an entire box of pew-pew seeds. At level 5, we got another wild plants, that meaning oranges and daikons or white radishes at this time, as well as dead rats, which can be butchered for their meat. At level 6, you gain access to even more wild fruit, including lemons, limes, habaneros, and jalapenos. At level 7, you gain access to even more wild plants, including grapes, apples, lettuce, bell pepper, peanuts, pumpkins, and mangoes. You can also find wild frogs and dead birds at this level. Now at level 8, you can find more wild plants, including strawberries, grapefruits, peaches, pears, avocados, zucchini, and eggplant. as well as wild and regular eggs can be found, dead squirrels, and even all the various traps used for trapping. The final category at level 8 is more forest rarities, and hiking bags and big hiking bags being able to be found. At level 9, you can find bananas as wild fruit, and level 10 lets you find more wild fruit in the form of pineapples and watermelons. You can also find dead rabbits. This covers all the different categories and levels of what you could find, but I will mention 2 more things before we go. First up, the various categories I just discussed have higher and lower likelihoods of being found based on the different regions that you're searching, such as trash being 40 weighted more likely in a trailer park or a town versus having a weighting of 5 likelihood of being found in the woods. I'll put a chart on screen showing all the various categories and locations that affect them. And the final thing that affects foraging, that being your search focus, of course. Search focus is an ability that allows you to set what you'd like to look for specifically, which provides, depending on the category you're looking for, a minimum and maximum boost percentage. So take firewood. It at a minimum makes you 25% more likely to find firewood, and at its maximum, 40% more likely to find firewood. And this applies to 12 of the categories I mentioned earlier, which will have a chart listed on the screen showing all the categories. The minimum level you have to be to use that focus, and how much it increases your likelihood to forage said category. Keep in mind that many of the categories like ammo or junk weapons can't have their likelihood increased by a focus and will remain mostly luck based. With that, you should know just about everything you need to forage successfully. So just keep this information in mind. Get out there and search up some loot to keep y'all's asses alive. I hope you enjoyed this informative video. I'd like to thank all the members and donors seen on the screen for y'all's support. This has been Core, and I'll see y'all next time.